Hi everyone, this is Elizabeth and I'm going to show you my picture book analysis. For my project, I chose Two Tales of the City. So my first one, Make Way for Ducklings, and then my second book is Last Stop on Market Street. So we're going to start with Make Way for Ducklings. This one was done in 1941, so it's a little bit older book by Robert McCloskey, and it also won the Caldecott Medal in 1942. This book was done totally in brown and white, no color images at all. Um, it was done in charcoal, lithographed on zinc plates to produce the pages. Something you notice right away when you start looking at these images is they're very realistic looking. This story takes place in Boston, and you can tell, like, if you've ever been to Boston, you recognize this architecture. It's very detailed, very precise. One other cool thing about the illustrations is that the author, Robert McCloskey, he actually bought some ducks and brought them into his studio and he observed them for a while, and you can definitely tell his attention to detail by looking at these images. The ducks are very realistic and each of them has its own personality and look. One cool thing about this story is that we kind of follow the ducks through a lot of the images. We get their perspective as they're flying into the city of Boston. We're getting that bird's eye view of the world. As you can see in this, as they're flying over the river. Sometimes, though, we don't follow the ducks. Sometimes we get a different perspective on them. And in this image, they're little tiny specks in the bigger picture. And one thing McCloskey does here is as tension is building or emotion is building, he brings us closer to the ducks. So in this picture we see the ducks having a kind of hair-raising encounter with a boy on a bike, and we get a pretty big close-up view of the ducks and the boys speeding by. So some of the symbolism or cultural analysis for this one. The ducks here in the story, I think they represent a pastoral lifestyle. You got to remember that this book was done in 1941, and it's kind of a time when people are moving from the farms into the city to take jobs working in the city. And the ducks, they migrate every year, so migration is kind of the tie-in to the migration to the city. And in this book, the ducks are outsiders. They're coming in from outside and learning a new way of life in the city. So I kind of see a parallel there. The city, by contrast, represents the urbanization and the clock-centered life, whereas the ducks are living more of a seasonal life. They're, shedding their feathers in season, they're laying eggs in season. The clock-centered life is more daily, kind of 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 grind. As you can see in this one image of the factory, there's a clock up on the roof, and that kind of reinforces that idea. Police officers play a pretty prominent part in this story. This is kind of the main character police officer here in this picture. And the police in the story represent law and order. They're definitely the good guys. They help out the ducks and they're defending them. When the ducks are weak and helpless, the police officers step in and they help them make their way through the streets when they come up against adversity. And you can see here the illustration of this. You see quite the commotion as the ducks are trying to cross the street. The cars are in a hurry, and we just see this clash of the fast pace of the city coming head to head with the ducks, who are the relative outsiders who are trying to adjust and just trying to make their way home. So we've got quacking and honking, and as this conflict arises, the police officers will step in and help resolve the issue. One other symbol that comes up in the story that I thought was kind of meaningful was the peanuts. So in this image here, we see the police officer feeding the ducks peanuts. They also get fed peanuts by some people on the boat in the lake. And you got to remember that this story was done in 1941, so that's a time when the Great Depression was just coming to an end, and we're just getting into World War II, so there's like rationing and food shortages and that sort of thing that people are dealing with. So I kind of see this as a symbol of that, where the ducks are just trying to every day get a little bit of food, nothing fancy, just enough to get them by. And that's kind of what the people of those days were dealing with as well. Okay, so my second book, Last Stop on Market Street, another city story, but a little bit different. This one, as you can see, is a huge contrast visually from the last book. Big, bright, bold colors, blocks of color, and the images are very stylized. It's not realistic looking like the last book. It's a little more playful and fun. As you can see, the illustrator uses a lot of kind of the basic shapes. We see a lot of rectangles and circles and squares. And, you know, if you notice the cars in Make Way for Ducklings, they're very realistic looking. It was like something that if you went to a car lot during the 40s, it's probably something that you could identify there. Whereas these cars are very, you know, blocky and basic looking. You can tell it's a car, but you'd have no idea what make or model it is. So a very different approach. But I think that the one thing that does is it helps to make the little details pop. So we see a lot of cool little details throughout this story. So for example, on the bus, you see the little fire-breathing dragon. And there's different street signs and different graffiti and that sort of stuff thrown in throughout the story. And I think that just kind of having the basic blocky background makes those little details really stand out. And the way that this is drawn, it really could be any city. You know, I think that a kid in Los Angeles or a kid in Chicago or a kid in Philadelphia, they could all see little aspects of their own city in these drawings. So it's something that, because it's drawn a little bit more generically, it's something that they can bring home and apply and kind of see their own city within these images. Most of the images, we're looking at the characters from a front view. It's almost like what you would see when, you know, a 4 or 5-year-old is drawing a picture of his house or his family. You're always looking at them from the front. You're never getting like a side angle or a back angle. It's always kind of that basic front angle. And that's the style of pretty much all the images in this book. One cool kind of sense of contrast that we see in this book is CJ, who's the little boy character, and Nana, who's his grandmother. Differences in their perspective. So right now we're looking at a picture, and it's the city street from CJ's point of view. And in it we see kind of some ugly graffiti, some chain link fence, not too pretty. But then when we see Nana's view, it's the same picture, but it expands. And we see a little bit more beauty. We get a rainbow, and we get the birds flying up in the air. So, same picture, different perspective. One thing that the illustrator does to kind of build some anticipation is stack images on top of each other. Most of the images in the book are 1 or 2 page spreads, but these little tiny images are kind of building us up, and here's the high point of the story. So those three images sort of set us up for this one big, huge, bold, bright image. And this is definitely the apex of the story, where CJ is enjoying the music and he's got his arms wide open, and we've got this great, bold blue background. So some of the symbolism in this book, you see a lot of diversity. We have characters of every age and every nationality and some different disabilities and all sorts of, socioeconomic classes as well. So that's something that kind of serves as a reminder that even though there's a lot of different people out there, we all share some things in common and we can all appreciate each other. And there's no reason to, be afraid of someone who looks a little different than you because we all kind of have a shared sense of being human and lots of little shared characteristics. Nana is kind of the character who brings that out in this story. As you can see here, she's always relating to people. She's always kind of quietly talking to people, and she has a very keen sense of wisdom and understanding and shows a lot of love throughout the story. At one point in the story, we see CJ watching some older kids who get on the bus, and he's looking at them with envy. They have an iPod, and that's something in the story that represents materialism and kind of a desire for what other people have. But you see later on how Nana is able to show CJ that sometimes the newest gadget isn't the most important thing. You can get enjoyment out of some more simple things in life. One other symbol that we see, as we talked a little bit earlier, is the rainbow. And that's something that I think is important to Nana in this story as kind of a symbol of hope and beauty. The city isn't always pretty. There's definitely some negative things going on, but she's always seeing the brighter side. There's more to the picture than all the negative. There's always a positive, and Nana's able to bring that out for us throughout the story. So that's my presentation. I hope you enjoyed it, and I definitely recommend both of these books if you have a chance to check them out. Definitely some great stories and some awesome illustrations. Thank you.